Today I'm going to be reviewing the Sigma 100-400 f5-6.3 DGDN Contemporary for the Sony E mount. I've been using this lens for about a year now, and I think I've run it through its paces. This review is going to be my personal opinions and experience using the lens and not a technical demonstration with charts and that kind of thing. The build quality of this lens is overall very good. I would put it in between the highest end lenses and lower end lenses of this kind. The lens is apparently made of a mix of metal and composite material, so it's comparatively lightweight, but it also feels durable at the same time. It has a brass bayonet at the mount with some weather sealing, and it has a 67mm filter thread. The manual focus control is closer to the mount, so if that's something that you like, well, you got it. But for me, what's nice about this is that I don't really manually focus this lens at all, and I always hold it by the zoom ring, and since the zoom is on the far end of the lens, I can more easily handhold this lens with much better balance than if the zoom and the focus ring were swapped around. The manual focus feels nice and smooth, but it doesn't feel linear. This doesn't really matter to me though, because I only use this lens with autofocus really, and I only use manual focus when the autofocus kind of gets stuck between the background and the foreground. The lens has a zoom lock, which helps because this lens does have creep when it's slung across your body. It also has an autofocus manual focus switch, an autofocus range limiter that includes full range, 6 meters to infinity, and closest focus distance to 6 meters, a programmable autofocus lock switch, and an optical image stabilization switch that has constant, release, and off settings. It also comes with a standard plastic hood to help with flaring. The lens does not come with a tripod mount, so if you want or need one, you will need to get the TS111 from Sigma, which is about $130. The lens comes with a little rubber band around where the tripod mount would be attached. Personally, I've never used this lens on a tripod, and I've always used it handheld, so I'm glad that the tripod collar is a separate item. Let's take a look at the weight difference between this Sigma and the Sony 100-400 G Master. When you go around shooting handheld with long lenses like these, that weight difference can matter, but for some it may not be significant at all. The autofocus on this lens is mostly good for both video and photography contexts. It can lock onto a moving subject rather quickly and does a good job of tracking even small birds on more modern bodies like an FX3 or an A7R4. The tracking is mostly good on an A7R3, and I mostly get good results when shooting most subjects. Newer bodies will have more hits than older bodies due to the better focusing systems on those newer bodies. I almost always leave the OIS option 1 on, which is supposed to give around 4 stops of stabilization. The optical stabilization mostly works well for photos, and it can be hit or miss when shooting video handheld at the longest focal length, which can result in artifacts. If you plan to use this lens for handheld video, stabilize yourself as much as possible and be sure to get enough coverage, because I can almost guarantee that you will have at least a few instances where you can see artifacts or tearing in your footage. Regarding OIS on this lens, be sure that your lens has the latest firmware installed. If you do not have version 0.2, you will need to send the lens into Sigma for the update. This is annoying that you can't just download the firmware and do it yourself, but, while it's there in the shop, you can ask them to check the lens for decentering or any other issues while it's in there. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's talk about the image quality. Really, I have only one demand for a lens like this and how I use it, and that's that the center is sharp enough wide open at the longer focal lengths to get good detail for the subjects that I shoot. Generally speaking, I'm going to frame the subjects near the middle and crop in post, so corner sharpness is mostly irrelevant. Some people use this kind of lens for landscapes, but I don't, so I apologize for the lack of sample images for that kind of photography. I'm happy to say that the sharpness and contrast is very good from this lens wide open, and due to the accuracy of the autofocus, you can get very sharp and detailed images without a whole lot of effort. As long as the autofocus nailed it and your shutter speed is fast enough, you will get very good results from the shortest to the longest focal lengths. Mostly, the issues and softness I have seen from users of any lens like this is that either the autofocus didn't catch or the shutter speed was just too slow. So make sure you study how fast the shutter speed needs to be in order to catch the motion that you're shooting, and that your focus settings are set properly as well. The lens does a very good job for what I tend to shoot, and I have been more than pleased with the results. My only real gripe with this lens is that the bokeh can sometimes look a bit busy, so I have to pay attention to the backgrounds that I'm shooting against, or I have to do some work in post to make the backgrounds melt away a bit better than they do in the original image. If you haven't used a lens like this before, or you're struggling to get decent shots, it's likely your technique and not the lens. So I advise checking out Mark Gaylor's channel and use his very helpful tips to get better results with Sony cameras. I have provided a link to a helpful video regarding action settings in the description below. I would recommend this lens to people who are looking for a relatively lightweight, long zoom for occasional wildlife or zoo outings that provides great quality images for a fraction of the price compared to the competition. I would say it's good enough to give you great images, but it's not the best you could buy if money was no concern for you. Let's look at the cost compared to the Sony 100-400 G Master. As you can see, the price of the Sigma with the tripod foot is less than half the cost of the Sony G Master. The Sigma package with the tripod foot will cost $1,079 and the G Master is coming in at $2,498. That is a significant jump in price. Now you're likely to ask, would I recommend the Sony over the Sigma? Well, in my view, the Sony is worth the cost only if you're looking for the very best lens on E-mount in this focal length. The Sony has slightly better image quality, a closer focusing distance, wider maximum aperture, faster and more accurate autofocus, and you can use teleconverters with that lens, whereas the Sigma is unfortunately barred from using teleconverters on the Sony system. Why do I not own the Sony? The price difference is pretty huge, and I don't really want to pay for it. The Sony is demonstrably the better lens, but I still say no, as the Sigma provides for me the better deal. I get most of what I want for less, but I still want that Sony. If they were closer in price, the Sony would be the one I'd get, so keep an eye out for major discounts if those ever come about. Some of you may ask how it compares to the Tamron 150-500. Well, they aren't quite comparable because they are different focal lengths. But for me, if I had to choose, the weight difference between the two turns me off on the Tamron. Even if these lenses were the same cost and the Tamron was the better lens optically, I would still pick the Sigma based on the weight. Well, that's it for this review. I hope that this helped you in picking a long zoom lens. If you like this video, please be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get more content from this channel. I would like to thank my patrons and give a big shout out to VIP patron Ray M. Thank you so much for all of your continued support. If you would like to help this channel out by supporting as a patron, please head over to patreon.com/TonyDay and sign up there for as little as $1 a month. Your support helps me to create tutorials and review videos like this one, and funds the individual support I provide the community regarding gear, color grading, editing, and all that fun stuff. Good shooting out there, and good luck to whatever projects that you might have going on, and I do look forward to speaking with you again next time.